friends, Laura here. I'm actually here to do a recommendation video, but also sort of a look forward video. I tend to read a lot of mystery thrillers in the summer and in the fall. I tend to like quick, fast-paced reads. They tend to be a little bit eerie and creepy, so I sort of went through all of the years I've been on Goodreads and sort of picked my favorite thrillers that I think you should check out. You will see there are a lot of author repeats because when I find a mystery thriller author, I tend to want to read everything that they've written, which you guys will just see that there's a lot of repeat authors, but I also do have a couple of new authors and also a lot of authors I'm looking forward to reading their books in the future. You are going to see a lot in this video is Jennifer Lynn Barnes. She writes a lot of mystery thrillers, and the first mystery thriller series that caught my attention a lot of years ago at this point was her Natural series. This is a tightly wound murder mystery story, but you basically follow this character, and she is basically trained to kind of be like an FBI profiler, and she kind of gets put on this case with all of these kids who have different specialties, and they kind of work as a team to kind of solve these murder mysteries. And it was really like a very, very well crafted story. This book is, if you're a fan of like people that have to work together, or like unlikely heroes, or like, you know, not typical kids, you have like another FBI profiler, you have someone that's really good at math, you have someone that's really good at emotions. There's a lot, and these characters have gone through a lot, and every book sort of focuses on a different character. It's a 4-book series. I loved it. I thought it was great. It's definitely a series I highly recommend that you read quick, like back together, like back to back, because it's again a very, very tightly wound story, and the closer you read these stories, I think the more enjoyable it would be. This book is definitely due for a reread because I read the book sort of years apart, and I think that took away the punch a little bit, but it's so well crafted. I love all the main characters in that story. There's definitely a romance that sort of develops, and every book sort of focuses on a different case, but there is a bigger case for the main character overall, and it was really, really well done. But it's the Natural series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Also, the author is, I think, a psychologist, so like she teaches that. So a lot of this book especially deals with a little bit of a harder topics. I would say that this is probably her hardest, or deals with the most complicated topics yet of books that I've read by her, but super enjoyable, really fast-paced, and a very, very tightly wound story. So I would definitely recommend the Natural series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I am going to chat about is one that is definitely probably one of my favorite mystery thrillers of all time, and that is Don't Look Back by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Your books, and it is a YA, but you basically follow this character, and she is found walking on the side of the road with no memory of the past 2 to 3, or I don't even know if it's 2 to 3 years. I don't think she has a memory of anything, really. She doesn't have a memory of anything. And she kind of comes back to her family with no memory of anything at all. And she also realizes that one of her best friends is missing, and they can't find her best friend. So she sort of kind of is trying to uncover what happened to her best friend, but also trying to get her memory back and figure out how she lost her memory, what happened to her best friend. But the most interesting part of this story for me was she was also learning a lot about herself. She was learning about the type of person she was, and the thing that I loved about this book is she really did not like the person she had became. She thought she was like a horrible person, so she sort of was like combating that a lot. It was a lot of like trying to figure out who hurt her and who hurt her best friend. It was really compelling. I loved it. I thought the ending was really shocking and surprising. I've said this before, that's hard to do in mystery thrillers to me. But I loved it. I've listened to this book like several times. I read it first a couple of years ago during Halloween. I think I reread it a recent Halloween. Really loved it, and I thought it was great. It definitely has the amnesia trope, which I love. I know people don't always like the amnesia trope, but I tend to really like it. I've read a couple of books in the past couple of years that have had the amnesia trope, and I've really enjoyed it. But this is definitely one of my favorites. It came out a while ago, but I would still recommend it. I thought that it was a really unique take on a mystery thriller, and it was super fun. Books we're going to chat about is the first book in the Study in Charlotte series by Brittany Cavallaro. I have read the first 3 in this series. I still need to get around to reading the last one, but we're going to talk about A Study in Charlotte. There have been so many Sherlock Holmes inspired stories, but this is definitely one of my favorite. First, because there's a female Holmes, which I really, really enjoyed. There's a male Watson. It goes from friendship to more, I would say that, over the course of the 4 books. There is a Moriarty character. I just really liked it. I think the first book is definitely my favorite because it's set at a boarding school. There's a murder mystery element, and it does delve into the darker side of the Holmes story, dealing with drugs and alcoholism. And you just really, really love Jamie. Like, Jamie's definitely one of my favorite Watson representations I've ever read. I've read quite a few, but he's definitely one of my favorites. It was great. I think that Brittany Cavallaro really is a Sherlock Holmes expert, I would say. She knows a lot about Sherlock Holmes, so she really put in a bunch of little, sneak peeks and, teasers and just, a lot of Easter eggs, which I really liked. But I also thought that it really tackled the Holmes myth in a really effective way. I definitely really need to get around to reading that last book, but the first 3 that I've read, I really enjoyed them all. And I think that it definitely tackled a lot of harder issues, but also focused on the relationship between Holmes and Watson, and definitely is one of my favorites. The book I'm going to chat about is one that I simply loved, and I have heard no one other than myself speak about it, but it is Not If I Save You First by Allie Carter. I'm sure other people have read this book, but I just haven't heard anyone speak about it. Definitely a mystery writer. She wrote the Gallagher Girls series. She wrote the Heist Society. She wrote what else? She wrote that new middle grade series. She has a lot of mystery thriller series, but this is her favorite book of mine, and it basically follows this main character and her dad, and her dad used to be the president's bodyguard, or his the head of his secret service. But when something goes wrong and an attack happens, her dad quits and they wind up going to live out in the Alaskan wilderness. Which is a very, very weird setting for a story. But when the first son suddenly arrives at this Alaskan wilderness, things go from bad to worse in a quick amount of time, and there is so much drama. Not only someone's trying to kill this young man, but also being in the Alaskan wilderness, it's really, really cold. It's drama. From page 1, this book is so fast paced, but you also get flashbacks to when these characters were younger, and I sped through this book so quickly. I think I read it in 2 days. I had to know what happened. Super quick. I love the main characters. I love the elements of the first son and all that all that political drama. But at the heart of it was also a friendship to more, which I adored, and it was great. I definitely have to go back and read the Gallagher Girls series by her. That's my only series of her that I have not read yet. But I really, really like this book, and it is a standalone, so you don't have to worry about a series. I think most of the other books she wrote are series, including The Heist Society, which is definitely my second favorite. But yeah, really, really like this one as well, and would love to see more people read it. Next book we are going to chat about is another book from Jennifer Lynn Barnes on this list, and this is actually a standalone, and it's called Lovely and the Lost. A photo will be posted. Say that this is not like her natural series. It does deal with harder topics, but it's not as intense as that story. But you basically follow this character who her past led her to be in a very, very complicated situation. She got lost in the woods, and she was saved by these rescue dogs. And after that, her parents lost custody of her, and she was sent to live with this woman that is involved with these dogs, and she wound up being adopted by them. And she wound up making it her mission to work with these rescue dogs to basically find other people. But when she gets sucked into a case about a missing girl, it sort of connects back to her past. It was really, really good. It was a standalone. I read it super quickly. I remember when I read this book because I was having such a hard time focusing that year because I was doing my production of Willy Wonka and my emotions and my focus was just not there. But this was one of the only books that month that I wound up finishing reading, and I really, really loved it. And I just love her writing style. And I thought that she tackled like the character's abusive mentality. Like the character was abused, she did deal with a lot of stuff, but also just it was a really, really well crafted story. Definitely a quiet story, not as intense as her natural series, but it was a book about dogs and a book about puppies and a book about rescue dogs. And I love books about dogs when they are not in peril. These dogs were not in peril. Great. I really enjoyed it. And this is definitely one of my favorite standalones by her. She does have a couple of other standalones that are like fantasy and science fiction, but I really like this one. And again, it didn't get nearly enough love and attention. So I definitely recommend you go back and check it out because this is the perfect time to read it. Talk about is definitely probably the most recent book on this list, and that is All Your Twisted Secrets by Diana Irving. Read. So you basically follow this character who's been sent basically instructions to go to like a graduation or like a scholarship dinner. But when they get there, it's revealed that there's a syringe on the table, and unless they choose to kill somebody, they're all gonna die. And it goes down a very dark rabbit hole. There's a lot of flashbacks to the past. There's a lot of interconnections between the characters. It was a wild ride. A really wild ride. And there is one trope in books that I don't like. Normally, this book did that trope so well. I don't want to say you guys a trope because it will like ruin the book for you, but I really liked it. I thought it was a fast-paced story. I really liked the flashbacks. I thought the characters were really interesting. It also deals with like harder topics that you deal with in like a high school, bullying and just, obsessiveness and perfectionist about your grades. So it was dealt with a lot. I liked it. She's coming out with a new book called These Deadly Games in early 2022. I really am excited for that. But this one was a wild ride and I really, really enjoyed it. And definitely think that if you haven't read it yet, you should definitely check it out. What about is another series, and that is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This series is very different because every book kind of does a different trope. So the first book is sort of like this girl is determined to uncover what happened to her former best friend's brother because her best friend's brother was committed of killing somebody, and she's not convinced that that's what happened. So the whole first book is sort of her uncovering that and sort of figuring out what actually happened to this girl in her town and how she died, and was her best friend's brother really the killer. That's the first book. The second book has a more of a podcast element and deals with the aftermath of book 1, and book 3 comes out soon, which I haven't read yet. But I loved it. I think I liked book 2 normally there's a book 2 slump, and I thought that the podcast element was really unique. But for book 2, it did talk about like what happens when you're over 16 and you go missing. And I thought that was something that's really interesting because a lot of times I watch a lot of true crime videos, but once you hit that 17, 18 mark, you can't be reported missing by your family because you can technically disappear and not tell anyone where you're going. That was heavily dealt with in book 2. I like that there was a podcast element. There's also a continual romance as the books go on, and I'm dying to get my hands on book 3. But this was a book that I devoured. Both of them I really liked for different reasons, and I'm really excited to see where book 3 comes in. But there's again, sort of like the previous book I talked about by Diana Irving. It deals with a lot of topics that you see in a high school setting: abuse, rape, sexual assault, stuff like that, and bullying. And I just really thought that both of these books by Diana Irving and by Holly Jackson handle those topics really, really well. One thing to note, this book is set in England. I don't think book 1 made that super clear, but this series is set in England as well. And I just really thought it was great, and I'm excited to get my hands on book 3 hopefully soon. I did get an e-arc of it. The podcast theme book that I'm going to chat about is I Hope You're Listening. Here's a photo. Some LGBTQ representation as well, but you basically follow this girl, and she was a part of a group of kids that got missing when she was younger. It was her and her best friend, and her best friend got taken, and she was not. And she was found a couple of days or weeks later, and she was perfectly fine. But she always felt like she could have done more to save her best friend. So, to sort of combat that, she decided to make this podcast about people that have gone missing, like current active missing person cases, and tries to get information to save them. But when a mystery sort of connects back to her own past, she sort of has to make the decision, should she dive into this mystery and kind of uncover all these worms, or should she leave it alone? I thought that this was a really unique podcast story because it didn't there was a lot of cases that sort of hadn't, and a lot of the cases she was talking about were current missing person cases. So I thought that was a really interesting take on it. I also really just liked the diving into your past and connecting it. I also like um the LGBTQ plus main character, and there was a romance that developed. It was great. I thought it was a really unique podcast story, and I've read a couple recently. If you guys want me to do a podcast video about all the books that I've read that have included podcast, comment below, and I'll be sure to do it before the end of the summer. But I really like this. I got this one from a blog tour from the TBR and Beyond reading group, and I really enjoyed it. And I will definitely check out more by this author in the future because this book was definitely a home run hit for me. A little bit farther behind on this series than I would like, but I do want to touch on Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. Here's a photo. Another book that teaches a boarding school, and you follow this girl named Scotty. I think her name is. It's been a bit since I read this one, but she winds up getting accepted to this prestigious school. Her whole thing is she wants to solve mysteries, and there's a bunch of a mystery with this school back in a couple of years ago. The founder's wife and daughter went missing, and no one has ever been able to figure out what happened to them. So you're sort of in that timeline, and you're also in the present as Scotty is trying to uncover this mystery. But this story was really, really interesting and very, very fast paced. I love school books that are set in like a boarding school type setting. It was fast paced and engaging. I actually still do have Vanishing Stairs on my TBR, so I might try to get to that soon. If not now, then early in October. But yeah, very, very good. I like Maureen Johnson's writing. I think her writing of mysteries and thrillers is very, very captivating. And I really did like Scotty as a main character as well. And the last book I'm going to chat about in this video is just a middle grade series, but that is the Tunnel of Bones series by Victoria Schwab. Here is a photo. A middle grade series that focuses on a young girl who has a deep connection to some ghost in the other world because she almost died, and this ghost wound up saving her, so she's very, very connected to her best friend named Jacob. And every book follows her as she goes to different cities because her parents run like a supernatural TV program, and she kind of tags along. There is one that's set in Scotland, there's one set in Paris, and there's one set in New Orleans so far. I love this series so much. It's a very, very quick paced read. I think as the stories go on, you just start to become more invested in the relationship between the two main characters, but also you get to see side characters that sort of incorporate, and some of them do come back in future books. It was really, really fun. Definitely like a perfect eerie and creepy read to read in the Halloween or around summertime. Or if you have a little one that just likes eerie and creepy stuff and wants like not as chaotic as like Stranger Things or something, would definitely recommend this series for you as well. So the next few books I'm going to chat about are books that are not currently out yet or come out very, very soon that I have my eyes on. And most of these I did get e-arcs from ALA, but let's get into it. The first book we're going to chat about is The Girls Are Never Gone by Sarah Glenn Marsh. That wrote Reign of the Fallen, which is a fantasy series, but I'm just going to read you guys a little bit of the blurb for this book because I found it really compelling when I read about it. But it says, The Conjuring meets Sadie when a 17-year-old podcaster, Dare, takes an internship in a haunted house and finds herself in a life or death struggle against an evil spirit. And this one does have a sapphic romance in it as well. It's very eerie, very, very creepy. There is a podcast element. I would call Dare a skeptic. The haunted house is really interesting. I actually did wind up reading this one. I read this one this week when I was filming. But I loved it, and I think you would definitely love to check this book out in early September when it comes out, because it's set over the summer, but it's definitely eerie and definitely creepy. And I really enjoyed this book, but it's not out yet, so that's why it's on this list. And the next book we are going to chat about is The Dark and Shadow Lies. So here is a photo. Gone does come out September 7th. This book comes out August 31st, so it comes out a little bit sooner. And the blurb that caught my attention was: a teen girl disappears from a small town deep in the bayou where magic festers beneath the surface and the swamp like water rot. This chilling debut supernatural thriller for fans of Natasha Preston, Catherine McManus, and Rory Power. And it does take place in Louisiana, and it just sounds so eerie and so creepy, with maybe a little bit of a magic twist, and I'm definitely here for it. So I definitely hope to tackle this book relatively soon. And the next book I want to chat with you all about is They Will Never Catch Us by Jessica Goodman. Also the author that last year wrote They Wish They Were Us, which took place at a boarding school. This book will come out July 27th, but it's comes a fast-paced thriller about sisters vying for the top spot on a cross-country team until a teammate's disappearance throws their lives off course. And I think that these sisters, they don't really get along, but they're all both vying for the same exact spot. And someone that they're competing against disappears, and they're basically thrust in the spotlight for belief that they did it. I did enjoy her first day book. I struggled a little bit with the characters in that one a little bit, but this one sounds really, really cool, and I hope to get to it soon. I did get an e-arc from ALA, so it is high on my TBR, but it sounds great. Also, her books are, I know her first book was set on Long Island, and I live on Long Island, so I really did like that element of it, but I enjoyed it. So hopefully I like this one. It does come out July 27th, relatively quickly, so I need to get my butt moving so I can read it. But I'm really excited for this one, and her first book was decent, so I will definitely be checking out this one, and it just sounds really, really interesting, so I hope you guys will consider checking out when it comes out soon. Talk about is Stephanie Perkins' newest book, and that is The Woods Are Always Watching, and this also comes out August 31st, so a couple of books come out that thriller. I will admit, I wasn't the biggest fan of There's Someone Inside Your House. I struggled with that one a little bit, but I'm willing to give this one another chance. This book does deal with some woods. There's these two best friends. It's the summer before they go their way for college, and they go for a 3-day hike deep in the national forest, but it leads them to some eerie and some creepy development. But it does focus highly on friendship, which I am excited for, because that was the one thing I struggled a little bit with in her first book. It was a very, very isolated character, and I didn't like the writing style as much, but I'm hopeful that this one I won't have those problems, so that is why I put it on this list, and it does come out in late July, so I'll definitely be adding this to my TBR when I can get around to it. Talk about in this video should be no surprise, because it is the sequel and the concluding novel to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Here is a photo. Change my angle a little bit for the last clip, but this book is the concluding novel in that series. It does come out September 28th, and it deals with the aftermath of the first two books in the series. I'm really excited for all these reads. I hope you guys enjoyed my recommendations. I will talk to you guys soon for another recommendation video. If you have any recommendations you would like to see me do, put them in the comments, and I'll be sure to add them to my filming queue, and I'll talk to you guys soon for my next video. Bye, friends!